Hi, my name's Neil. Welcome to my YouTube channel. Thanks for checking out this video. Today I'm going to be talking about the deck that I'm currently riding, a little bit of experimentation with an alternative which takes a little bit of a weird twist. Okay, so if you watch my YouTube channel at all, maybe you've seen the pinned video that's on my channel, which is titled something like, "What am I currently riding?" That's a video where I go through the board that I'm currently riding. I think it was probably about a year ago that I actually made that video, but nothing much has changed. Just to recap, if you haven't seen that video, I'll leave a link in the description below anyway, because there's some references in this video that will reference that, and so yeah, you might want to check it out for context. But the deck that I have been riding for quite some time now is one of these, which is a Bucky Lasek Powell Peralta flight deck, one of their flight construction decks, which means that it's 5-ply with a couple of layers of a composite laminate. People say they're carbon fiber. I'm not completely sure that it is. I don't know really, but you can see on the top layer it's a black composite of some sort. So yeah, that's the deck that I'm currently riding, and I've really got used to this board, particularly the shape, the kind of mold, the concave of it, the length. Quite specifically is 15-inch wheelbase, which really suits me as well. Most decks these days are about 14 and a half, but 15-inch kind of suits me pretty well. So I really do like these decks, and as you see, I've got one here brand new in the wrapper waiting to ride. Now, the backbone of this video and the story is that these decks are really expensive. In the UK currently they're about £140, which is a lot of money for a skateboard deck. That's probably 3 times the price of a lot of other decks that are available. Partly that's due to it being a flight deck, and flight decks seem to be really expensive anyway, maybe because of the composite that's in there and the manufacturing costs that go to making that. The background information to flight decks really is that they are much stronger, and so they're much harder to snap. I don't know anybody that's actually managed to snap one before. I'm sure somebody somewhere has. Also, they retain their pop and their kind of as new feeling. They retain that for ever, basically. They've always felt as new to me when I've been riding them, and I've been riding them for a few years now. So yeah, that's kind of the background to the deck. But to be honest, I don't really need that kind of technology and that special kind of extra that they offer. What I really like is the deck shape, the mold, the concave, everything about it. I don't need the flight part of it. Because of the price, I started to do some research into what I could do as an alternative. And while looking around on the Powell Peralta website, I looked up the details of this deck, and luckily Powell Peralta are very good. They actually list the name of the mold. So that's the actual shape, the pressing, the mold that the pressing is used, and they give them all like serial numbers. So this mold is the K21, and so I had a look to see if there's any other K21s, because they don't make a 7-ply version of this deck. It's a flight deck or nothing. So I thought, okay, let's see what other K21s there are, and I found another K21, and actually it's very cheap. So just for kind of basic specs, this is a 8.62 width, 15-inch wheelbase, and 32.2 length, I think it is. The only other K21 I could see on the Powell Peralta website is actually an 8.75 and 39.9 long. So it's very long, but it is the K21 concave. So the price of them, I found some in a sale. At least I think they're in a sale. It might just be that they are that cheap, but they were £30. So the difference between £140 and £30 is obviously enormous. Now, these are obviously a 7-ply, which is what I was looking for, and the K21 mold. So that really was the boxes ticked, but it's too wide and too long. But I had a thought. Firstly, I'm going to try one. I thought I'd try one because 8.62 and 8.75, they're not that much different, but the length may be an issue. So I got one, and that is here now. And effectively, this is one of what Powell Peralta sell as a cheaper deck in general. So they're 7-ply ones. They are still made of maple, hard rock maple, just like all their other Powell Peralta 7-ply decks. They're pressed in China, but pretty much most of the skate decks in the entire skate industry these days are pressed in China. There are some pressed in America and some pressed in Mexico, but a huge amount of them now are pressed in China. A lot of the manufacturers don't even tell you that. I know a lot of people have a problem with China in general. You know, if you do have a problem with that, I think you're going to have a real tough time in your life trying to avoid anything from China. Fair enough if you're trying to support the skate industry, but I still am, because I'm still buying from Powell Peralta. Anyway, I'm not going to get all political, but just to say that they are the same construction as every other Powell Peralta deck and every other deck in general anyway. Still hard rock maple, same glue. Powell Peralta have a air laminate factory where their presses are actually like pneumatic rather than hydraulic jacks and things. They're air presses. Effectively, the construction is just like any other deck. That's what I'm trying to say. So they're not like cheapy decks. They're not like it's gonna be terrible, it's going to feel like soggy wood or whatever. The construction is just the same as any other Powell Peralta 7-ply, but it's 8.75. Now, if I lay this on top, hopefully you can see it's barely wider, and you can see that it's a bit longer, but it fits perfectly inside each other because they're the same mold. So my plan is to skate one of these and see how different it feels. My kind of ultimate plan is going to be to trim one of these down, actually draw around the Bucky Lassick deck onto this 7-ply and cut it out so that it's a 1-to-1 copy of the Bucky Lassick, but in a 7-ply version. But first I'm going to skate it just to see if it's even worth doing, how different it might be. So yeah, that's the master plan. I'm glad I found at least something that is the exact same mold, because worst case scenario, I cut it down and I make a 1-to-1 copy. And I'm actually quite intrigued to see how long the 7-ply lasts compared to the flight deck, because usually the flight decks last me well over a year. I think the Steve Caballero one that I rode lasted like 2 years. My last 2 Bucky Lassicks have lasted about a year each. Maybe that's because I'm skating more often or harder or whatever. When I say last, they last probably much longer. The first thing that goes really is that because they're a slightly thinner construction, they razor tail a little bit earlier, and as soon as they start razor tailing and it gets super sharp, I then have major fear of getting stabbed in the ankle by it, because when the tail is super sharp and it stabs you in the ankle when you bail or something, it hurts a lot. But as well, you know, quite often they start sort of chipping away on the sides and, you know, getting sort of splintered and such. And I do re-grip my decks quite often as well, because I don't want to just change the deck because it needs better grip tape. So I just re-grip it probably every 4 or 5 months. And so after a while, re-gripping them takes its toll. The fibers on this composite laminate, they kind of sometimes peel up with the grip. When you peel it off, you get strands of it coming up as well. So they do wear out eventually, but it's never a thing of like it's losing its pop or it's, you know, gone soggy or anything. The flight decks don't seem to do that. So I'm really interested to see how long the 7-ply lasts in comparison, certainly for me, because I don't skate anything but transition. I do some tricks that are kind of fairly heavy landing, like disasters and lip slides and things like that, but I'm not bashing it around street skating, so my boards do last longer. So it's an interesting experiment at the very least. So I'm going to set it up, I'm going to skate it and see what happens. Okay, so what we have here is my regular Powell Peralta bucky elastic deck. I really like the shape. The concave here is really nice for my front foot. If I place the bucky elastic deck on top of the 7-ply board, just have a look, you can see it is the same mold. It fits perfectly. It's exactly the same. It's very, very slightly different. There's not much in it, but it's just the shape of the deck and some very slight contours on the edges. So it's almost the same. Because it's the same mold, I'm going to cut around the outside so that I end up with the same shape as the bucky elastic deck on the 7-ply deck. And so what I need to do in order to line that up and draw on it, I'll just take some regular truck bolts and put them through the holes. Okay, so put some truck bolts in just to line it up, and then I'll draw around with a Sharpie just to get the shape exactly right. And let's lift that off. And you can now see that there's barely anything in it. Just a little bit on the nose and a little bit contoured at the back. I kind of wonder whether it's even worth doing. And my only real thoughts about doing it is because the width of the trucks. I ride on 149s Indies, and if I place the 149 on the current width, it looks like it could be a tiny bit too narrow, just a tiny bit. Does that matter? I'm not sure. It might actually be an okay fit. Maybe I should try it without cutting it. Right, so there we go. I actually decided not to cut it down because it looked so little amount to actually cut off. So I did the grip tape. I did my normal Powell Peralta logo. I can show you how I do that in another video. I'll put a link down in the description for that. But I decided to grip it and just try it as it is with the 8.75 width. It was only after that I gripped it that I went to put my trucks on, and as I explained before, you know, they looked like they were a decent width. You know, they looked like they would be just right. If it really shows on the camera because of the, I think the lens distortion, it looked like it would be all right. However, when I did actually put the trucks on, they looked too narrow and they were too sunk away, so they weren't actually wide enough, and you can barely see these ones now sticking out, and these are actually 159s, and I usually skate 149s. So these are the hangers from the 149s, and I've literally just changed over to 159 hangers. And to be honest, there is really not a lot of difference in the width from 149 to 159, but it's just enough to make it look a little bit better. Otherwise the trucks are too narrow, and so the wheels are too inset, and they just don't look right on a 8.75 board. I'm trying the 159s. I don't usually like wider trucks. I prefer the 149s, and I've stuck with them for so long, but I had these 159s that I'd used before in the past. So I'm going to try these out. I mounted my rails as per normal and my Bones wheels. We should be good to go. So I'm going to try that out. If for whatever reason I don't get on with the 159 trucks, I will have to cut it down and then go back to the 149s. That's it. So let's go and ride it, see how it goes. You know, what was weird was that I had to change the trucks. I usually skate 149s and I had to move to the 159s because they didn't look right. That extra width of that deck, you know, it's a tiny, tiny amount, but the 149s just look like the wheels were too close to each other, you know, that they were getting hidden by the deck, whereas you really do need your wheels kind of the same sort of width as your deck. It's not nice to have them too narrow, and it's not nice to have them super wide like a mega ramp board or something. So having them perfectly aligned, you know, the difference between the 149s and the 159s is tiny, obviously, but I had to go to the 159s, and I had a set of 159s, as you see, but I hadn't skated them very much, so they were as good as new, and that meant the trucks weren't worn in, and so they were a bit slippy laterally because I hadn't got my grooves worn in yet from skating them a lot. So I'm going to play you the footage of some skating. It was towards the end of the skate session. It's at my regular local place at Bay 66 skate park. I was skating the bowl and just trying to get some of my mini ramp tricks in the bowl. So let's check out that footage now anyway. So there you go. I'm kind of skating it as per normal, nothing major, no major problems. And yeah, I was just trying to get myself back into the bowl and doing some tricks, because the last few weeks I've spent a bit too much time in the mini ramp, and that's about 4.5 feet high, maybe 5 feet high. I'm getting a bit too comfortable in the small stuff, and it's making it a bit more difficult in the big stuff. So I need to get out of the mini ramp into the bowl again to do some more challenging things with a bit more height and a bit more steepness. So the skateboarding aside, the board skated okay. It felt odd. It actually, there's a lot of psychology behind this, but when I stuck it over the coping for the first time to drop in on the ramp and I looked at it, the extra width kind of made it look a bit like a boat or something. It just looked a lot wider, which was odd. Completely odd. So that was a bit psychologically weird. But when I started skating it as well, I could feel that the tail was very slightly longer, and it felt like I was hitting the tail, or the tail was hitting down earlier when I was doing various things, when I was just kicking, kick turning, whatever. It just felt a little bit odd. And so although I had a pretty decent session, it felt a bit weird, but otherwise it skated well. The concave and the feel of everything in that sense was perfect, because it's the same mold, but I still had that feeling in the back of my head. I wasn't 100% happy with this new deck. So I came home and thought about it, and the next day I got the tools out and I cut it down.